Good evening, everybody. Keith Engle here for TGI Sports Talk's college football / sports huddle. Those are quotes. Good to have you with us. Welcome, everybody, tonight watching on TGI Sports Talk's Facebook feed, on our YouTube feed, on X. This will repeat live tonight at midnight and Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Saturday morning, midnight tonight. We'll repeat the show on Roku, the Northeast Streaming Sports Roku channel. And we're also live on Let's Talk Sports YouTube channel as well. And then, of course, we share it to all the pertinent groups afterwards. We've been doing really well, guys. Man, the views are through the roof. I want to give a quick shout out to Ralph Williams from RW Media. Ralph does some great stuff out of Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh-centric and national stuff as well, and even outside of the sports world. Catch him and specifically catch him and Smoking Jim Frazier every Tuesday from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern on the Sports Corner on Facebook, YouTube, and there's even a local Pittsburgh channel you can watch it on. So check that out. My thanks to last week's guest on One-on-One with Keith Engle, Mr. Paul Rosen, former para hockey player, if you will. First, was the oldest Paralympics hockey player ever to make their debut at 41 years old, and then won a gold medal in 2006. We had a great talk with him. He's coaching now hockey in Australia, and he was kind of come on with us in the middle of the night, basically Friday morning. So we thank him. Catch that out. Great interview, by the way. Again, we've had some great interviews lately of with some guys who had great promise in the sports that they were in, went through some trials and tribulations, and came out the other side. And I really have enjoyed the conversations that we've had. And this Friday, we'll have Jim Sundborg, former catcher with the Texas Rangers, came up as, I think, a 20-year-old with the Rangers in 1974. Billy Martin brought him up, and then he actually won a World Series in 1985 with the Kansas City Royals. We've had a lot of those 85 Royals on the interview show. Greg Pryor was one of my first interviews. Buddy Biancalana we had on recently. We're going to have Brett Saberhagen on in July. So a lot of great guys. And I think there's somebody I'm missing, I think, from that team as well. But in any event, we'll have Jim Sundberg on Friday morning at 9. Guys, things are a little quiet in the world of college sports. We'll get into some stuff. We'll look at the NCAA baseball. I just lost my all my stuff I had up for the baseball review of the College World Series, but we can take a quick look at that. The Big 12, really, you're talking about selling out, and I guess they're literally selling out. They're about to take potentially some big equity money and also naming rights for the league, possibly Allstate paying as much as, I want to say, $1 billion, $2 billion, whatever it was. I think it was $1 billion. We can talk about that stuff. We can talk about Les Miles and Matt Hatter suing LSU for vacating 30 some of his wins, and he thinks it's costing him a shot at the College Football Hall of Fame. Notre Dame, 2025 commits. Jerome Bettis' son, Plaxico Burress' son, Ike Taylor's son, the Pittsburgh Steelers, well represented on the college campus of Notre Dame. USC and Ole Miss have canceled a home and home. Pat McAfee, is that his name? Potentially will not be back with ESPN game day this year. He has not signed a contract there yet. We're only 2 months away, basically, or a little bit more from the first game. And he has not decided to come back. And we can get into a little bit of conversation, if you'd like, about, I was thinking this today. I don't know what got me into it, but what is the who's the best college quarterback of all time? We've had a lot of conversations about best running backs, best players in general. I saw a list today that just blew my mind. I agree with number one, Tim Tebow, but I mean that Case Keenum is in a top 10. I mean, and I just don't get that. So, in any event, who's hanging out with us here? Who's hanging out with us tonight? Daniel Barry, we always say, check out Daniel Barry's stuff on YouTube. Great stuff, obviously. And we're happy when he stops in. We're happy to give him a little plug. Rick Sherlock is with us. Wake Forest. You did mention, who are they? Rick giving us our Amsterdam Mohawks, which is basically college summer league, similar to the old Cape Cod League. There used to be a league up in Alaska that Tom Seaver very famously played in. These were all wooden bat leagues. And Rick, I know I've asked you this question, I think, before, and I don't know that I've gotten, if I remember the answer, you probably have given me one. Perfect Pitch League is wooden bats, I think. I'm not positive. Check me out there, or give me an answer there if you could. Wake Forest has 2 players on the Mohawks, and also Alabama, Mississippi State. I don't know what NGIT is. That New Jersey? Not sure. Unless that's a misprint. Clemson and Kentucky will all have players on the Amsterdam Mohawks this year. So good for them. Congratulations to them. College World Series. Let's see. I had this all keyed up to go, man, and it's ticking me off. Let's take a look at this. Maybe I can get it here in the bracket. So, College World Series. Tennessee is advanced to Omaha. Texas, A&M, and Florida. These teams are all in Florida, right? Athens. Let's see. North Carolina State's in. Florida State is in. That looks to me like bracket 1. We got Tennessee. Tennessee has advanced to the finals. That's my bad. They were in the bracket with bracket 1 with Florida State, Virginia, UNC. Double elimination. Double elimination, I believe. So they advanced to the finals, and we've still got Texas A&M and Florida to determine the second bracket winner. Florida has 1 loss. Texas A&M has none. So I picked Tennessee to win this in the beginning. If you remember, when we were at the very beginning of this, and I might have picked them to play Texas A&M, but again, not remembering. I think I don't want to be held too closely to that. So anyway, this would be Tennessee's got a good baseball history in the NCAAs, and Texas A&M, a good program. Good program. The football team could learn something from the baseball team here. Rick says, yes, wooden bats and New Jersey Institute of Technology. I should have probably figured that out. RIT, I know, is Rochester Institute of Technology. I should have figured that out. Thank you, Rick. I think, Rick, what I'm going to try, because I've got some spots in July, I'm going to try to get I'm going to talk to Larry Sorensen. In fact, I already have talked to Larry Sorensen a little bit about coming on a Friday morning and doing a one-on-one with Larry and talk to him about Wake Forest college sports in general and hit the state of baseball today, Major League Baseball. Larry, we've already done the whole, and we'll talk about Larry's career a little bit too, but we won't dive into that full stream because we've already had Larry on and done that. But we'll have him on, and I think that will be a great hour on a Friday morning. I'll let you guys know when that's coming up. Chris is with us. Have to touch base with your buddy Paul Rosen. The talk of neck guards on the minor league level has all but disappeared. A lot of protection. I mean, hockey's really changed over the years, right? And I didn't get a chance, and we might have Paul on again. Paul was a great interview. I had a lot of fun with Paul Friday. We talked a lot about hockey in Canada and youth hockey, but I wanted to talk to him, and we talked about the NHL, but in deference to this show, one thing I didn't get a chance to talk to him about was college hockey in the U.S. and how it might compare with, the upper levels of juniors, if you will, before they jump to the NHL and the pros in Canada. So anyway, College World Series has progressed nicely. We know that the women's have already finished up long before the men, with Oklahoma winning. Congrats to them. think I was saying Oklahoma, by the way. These Omaha is where they're playing the College World Series. The other day, last week I was talking about Oklahoma. I don't know why. Anyway, a couple other news and notes here. It's an interesting topic too. Is some of the rivalries Saturday. With all the shifting that's going on in leagues the last couple of years, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I talked before, and I talked a little bit about this. I don't think I got a chance to talk about it Sunday too much. But the Big 12 and member schools have had initial discussions on potential private equity investment into the conference, which would give whatever firm came in, I think a 15 to 20% interest in the Big 12 and all of their profits. They need an influx of money. And there's talk of upwards of $1 billion being raised this way, and would make this private equity firm, a major part of the Big 12 and what they do going forward. 15 to 20% stake is not cheap. And as I said, the initial potential investment is anywhere between $800 and $1 billion of what they're talking about. It would help them shrink the revenue gap that the Big 12 has with the Big 10, the SEC, obviously, and even the ACC because of the lack of the big TV contract. And also they've had talks with selling the naming rights to the league itself to all states. So you'd have, for the first time in history, we've seen this in bowl games. We've seen this in other in stadiums, but we've never seen it, to my knowledge, in a league. You theoretically would have the all-state Big 12, and they would pay upwards of $1 billion for the right to do that. So Big 12's looking at everything they can do to get on a more level playing field with the other Big Four conferences. Remember, it's only 4 big conferences now, with the Pac-12 out of business. And it's possible, I suppose, as we go forward here the next 5 or 10 years, depending on what happens with more realignment or more consolidation into super conferences and a more huge change on the landscape, that one of these other conferences will step up and be that 5th major. Is it possible? John DeLon's not here with us, and I'm sure he would tell me there's no way even possible that somebody. Let me take a quick look at I want to take a quick look at something. That any of these other leagues, the AAC, let me go through them quickly. Could any of these conferences ever step up and be the 5th power conference? The AAC, they're losing SMU. They gain Army and lose SMU. That's not a good trade. I love Army. I love Jeff Monken. Not going to make this league any more powerful overall than it is. There's some good football schools there in Tulane and Memphis. UTSA, who I love them and their coach. But I don't see that happening. And Mountain West would be the one that I would think would have some kind of chance. Conference USA, no way. The Mid-American, now if somebody were to grab an independent, there's no independents left except Notre Dame. If somebody grabs Notre Dame, it's not going to happen, but say a Mountain West or AAC, where it's not going to happen, but they could get Notre Dame in the fold, then maybe you see something like that. Impossible. It will never happen. Mid-American Conference, no. Mountain West now is a little bit different story. Think about the Mountain West for a second. Boise, San Jose, UNLV, Air Force, Wyoming, Fresno, Utah State, all had good seasons last year. Utah State, not so much. I was thinking about basketball for a second, but in basketball, this matters as well. There's some potential there. If, say, Oregon State and Washington State become full-time members, you've got to prove it on the field. You've got to show it. You've got to show that there's an interest in the product that you're putting on the field, and a great interest at that. Pac-12 out of business. Southwest, Southeast, we know. Sun Belt, no. There's probably no way for a fifth power conference to step up. Now, you could see the AAC and the Mountain West combine into some kind of super conference. Possibly something would happen there, right? And if that conference could lure a Notre Dame's going to end up in the Big Ten eventually. Seems like a done deal. Speaking of Notre Dame, Newt Lars Johnny Rockney Jr. What a handle, son of Newt Rockney. That is a mouthful, man. Where'd Johnny come from? Newt Rockney, legendary coach of Notre Dame, as you guys should all well know. So anyway, there's some interest in back to the Big 12 again. We could end up again. You could have some conglomerate of schools in the Mountain West or the AC combined, and maybe grab a Notre Dame, and you've got a super, not a super conference. Well, you would have a super conference, but maybe a fifth big Power 5 school. Right now, you got 4, and Big 12 is kind of teetering. The Big 12 is a very interesting league now, with Utah and Arizona State, Arizona coming in, Colorado coming back. But there's no major, there's not that big, with Texas gone, Oklahoma gone, Nebraska long gone. I mean, this is a competent conference, but there's no major hook here. I mean, what's the big rivalry in this league? Iowa State and Kansas State, really. Oklahoma's got no natural rival left here. Kansas State. You've got some new rivalries in BYU and Utah, Arizona State. You got the Texas schools, I suppose, right? Texas Tech, TCU. But these aren't rivalries like Texas A&M, which is going to be rekindled. This isn't Alabama and Auburn. This isn't Georgia, Florida, even though Florida is basically a nail to Georgia's hammer now in the rivalry department. You can use that line anytime you like, Rick Sherlock. So this league is trying to get on equal footing, and they can't do it through a TV contract because there's not a hook there. I mean, yeah, they'll be great. There'll be good football played there, but the diehards will tune in. Certainly, Big 12 fans are going to tune in. Diehard fans are going to tune in. I'm a big fan of Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy. We know that. I like to watch them play football games. I like Kleinman and Kansas State. I like the way they play. Sonny Dykes, I like the way he coaches, and TCU bouncing back would be a big story for me this year. But the average fan is not tuning in to the schedule this team is going to put on the field. So they've got to take other avenues to try to close that gap. I got to check my email for a second. I was supposed to. Yeah, Robert did send me. Okay. I'll be on with Robert Butler, by the way, at 8:30. He had asked me to come on last week, and I didn't do this show. And I wasn't feeling great after some more oral surgery, so I didn't. I told Robert I wouldn't be able to do the show either, and I'll be doing it with him tonight at 8:30 if you want to tune in. I know we'll talk about Caitlin Clark, and we'll talk about the Patriots. We'll talk about probably some college football stuff, more of what we'll talk about here. But and as far as this show goes, we could take a few weeks off coming up. I know I've got a work trip planned to Utah, so we might take a hiatus for a month or 6 weeks. We did it last year, and I think it really probably behooved us to do it once we got through the college baseball and the spring football, and there really wasn't a lot to talk about. All the coaches' movement was done. I mean, basically, all we can talk about, nostalgic stuff. Like I said, if we want to talk about tonight, any nostalgia you want to bring up. teams from the past. I saw an interesting, and maybe I'll dive into that a little bit tonight to indulge myself, depending on the topics that come up from you guys. I saw an article in ESPN, about the 30 most influential teams in the history of college football. And there's some interesting teams you wouldn't even think about in here, and maybe I'll go through that. I was looking at the top quarterbacks in the history of college football. So those are topics we can get into, but I don't know that they'll carry us, another 10 weeks until we got football. And what I don't want, and I said this 2 weeks ago, we can talk about stuff off the field because that's all there is to talk about. But it gets to be, I don't want to be, NIL and transfer portal driven for 10 weeks. I'll go crazy. Hello, Steve Arpello up in Perth. How are you? Brewer sensation. The other Bob Gibson came out of Bloomsburg. I'm going to say something too in a second, by the way. Came out of Bloomsburg University of Pennsylvania. Hasn't produced another player in close to 30 years. Matt Karchner. There you go. College sports related. Bloomsburg University of Pennsylvania, which, quite frankly, Chris, I've never heard of. Chris is our Toronto correspondent, who I've also tasked with bringing, I don't want to say a name, interesting facts to the shows. And he does it in a way that doesn't break the rule of this is a college sports show, and he finds a college tie-in. Well done. I want to talk a little too before I think I will dive into these 30 most influential teams because I think you'll find it kind of interesting. But one thing I wanted to get into as well was this Les Miles story. I find it very interesting. Les Miles is suing LSU for vacating 37 wins because of recruiting violations stemming from impermissible benefits paid to the father of former player Vadal Alexander by a former booster. The ironic part is here, this would all be legal today. Don't forget where we sit. So listen, here's the thing. I'm with Coach Miles here. He feels that, he coached this team for 11 seasons. He won a national championship. He's coach of the year at least once, maybe twice. He have an overall winning percentage of let's see, with the 37 wins, 108. 665 because he had 108 wins compared to 73 now and a winning percentage of 597. And the reason that he's not eligible, I talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we talked about the coaches that were nominated for Hall of Fame induction this year. You got to have you have to have coached 10 seasons. And hold on one second here. I want to check something before I say this. You must have a career winning percentage in at least 100 games to qualify for selection to the College Football Hall of Fame. Now, he helped LSU win a national championship in 2007. He won 2 SEC titles. He also led Oklahoma State before then and Kansas later. Kansas, he didn't do very well. Oklahoma State, he was very successful. I think Les Miles may be deserving of the College Football Hall of Fame. I think they should give these 37 wins back to him. If they're going to give Reggie, and this is my hook here, if the NCAA is giving, and this is, I don't think Les Miles is even talking about this, but I'm talking about this. Well, if Reggie Bush gets his Heisman back, why can't Les Miles get these 37 wins back and make himself eligible for the College Football Hall of Fame? Whether you think he belongs in or not, he should have the opportunity to have his name put into nomination. So Les is now suing Let's see. He sued LSU. He also named the NCAA and the National Football Foundation, which manages the College Football Hall of Fame, as defendants. The lawsuit states he was deprived of property rights to the vacated wins and his nomination for the Hall of Fame, which must be done by those affiliated with an NCAA school. So somebody's got to nominate him. And it was 2 years ago, well, 1 year ago, I guess, that LSU vacated the 37 wins because of the violations, which today wouldn't be violations because it's the Wild Wild West, as we know. Miles' attorney, Peter Ginsburg, says our theory is over the course of his career, Les had certain achievements that he had a right to accept. In this instance, they triggered being on the Hall of Fame ballot. When that was stripped of him without any notice or due process, you don't go to court and try to fight this. At the time it happened, they just took them away. That action effectively deprived him of the property right to be on the ballot. He was never made aware of the NCAA investigation impacting his years he was at the school because he was long gone, nor was he interviewed during the process. So is he just trying to is he looking for money? I think he just wants his wins. This isn't about money. It's about getting his wins back. But isn't it without the wins, his percentage is high enough to be nominated? Without the wins, it's 596, I think I said, right? It's 600. It's got to be, you have to have a 600 winning percentage. And again, I talked a couple of weeks ago about these rules are a bit arbitrary in my mind. I mean, a great coach like, so Larry Coker is on the ballot because he won a national championship at Miami. You have to have coached 10 years at a school. So Larry, or have a 600 win percentage. And have a 600 win percentage. Pete Carroll, for instance, can't be on the Hall of Fame ballot, despite the fact that he won 2 and 3 or 3, depending on how you want to look at it, national championships at USC, but Larry Coker's on at Miami. I went through some of this a couple of weeks ago. The rules for coaches is ridiculous. Howard Schnellenberger won one of the most important games in the national championship in the college football history when his 2 touchdown underdog Hurricanes beat Nebraska in 1982, I want to say. But he's not eligible because he's got roughly a 500 winning percentage in college football. He put the University of Miami on the map, changed college football landscape for 2 decades. Isn't it without the wins, his percentage is not high? Without the wins, right. So he gets the wins back, he's eligible to be nominated. But without them, he's under 600. If I said that wrong, I apologize. You're up against public opinion for nominations. Public opinion can tear down an idea down to its carcass, even if the public has no idea about the sport. Best method, don't stir the pot. Well, my MO is stirring the pot, Chris. That's kind of what I do best. Everybody's good at one thing. Stirring a pot seems to be my thing, right? And I mean, again, there are a lot. I wish I could find this article again because let me see if I can find something real quick. Because some of it is just, it's ridiculous. You know, some of the coaches that can be nominated against some of the ones that can't. Pete Carroll has got to be considered for the College Football Hall of Fame. I'm sorry. He just does. You can think whatever you want about Pete Carroll. You can think about whatever you want to about his tenure at USC, which, by the way, we're in a very forgiving mood. I'm not necessarily. But I think everybody ought to be treated the same. If Reggie Bush can get his Heisman's back because the rules are now different, then Pete Carroll and Les Miles shouldn't be being penalized for things that are now legal, that were illegal when they happened. I'm not saying I'm okay with it, but let's be fair. Let's see. College football coaching Hall of Fame requirements. Let's just see if I can find this quickly. Active coaches become eligible at 75 years of age. Oh, my God. He must have been a head coach for a minimum of 10 years and coach at least 100 games with a 600 winning percentage. So there's several things in place here. You got to have coached 10 years. You got to have coached at least 100 games with a 600 winning percentage. That leaves out a lot of great coaches. Mike Leach is another example. He falls under. He's 596. He turned around programs at Texas Tech, at Washington State, at Mississippi State. Died tragically a couple of years ago. Is not eligible to be put into nomination for the College Football Hall of Fame. That's a silly, arbitrary rule. I mean, if you're 100 games under 500, if your winning percentage was 400, but you won 2 national championships, you can't be. I mean, come on. Let's see if there's anything else here. Not sure what this 75 years old is. Oh, active coaches. Active coaches can be put into nomination when they're 75 years old. So you don't have to retire before you're elected, by the way, or nominated at least. Oh, anyway, do I still have music going? You guys hear that music? Sorry about that. My bad. So again, this is just more NCAA and College Football Hall of Fame gobbledygook. Put the names in and let the people who are voting, who should know what they're voting about and what the guy's resume looks like. I mean, Larry Coker can get in. No disrespect to Larry Coker. Larry Coker gets in, but Howard Schnellenberger can't. Pete Carroll can't. Oh man, there was some other guys who were put in. Again, good coaches. Tommy Tuberville, probably not getting in, but that's not my point. My point is we can put their name up for nomination, but not some. Pete Carroll, whatever you think of Pete Carroll, is one for the time he was in college is one of the best college football coaches, over a given time span in the history of college football. I don't think that's even debatable. I'm sure if John DeLong came in, he would say wrong. If we lean to more National Enquirer this month, can we at least get the pizza recipe from Steve? Chris has been paying attention during the show, Steve Orpello. We'll do National Enquirer on Sunday when we talk about Bill Belichick and his new girlfriend, but it's not college related. And then again, Pete Carroll, cheaters of cheaters. So Danny, welcome to the show, by the way, Danny. Always welcome. One of Chris's imports. Thank you, Chris. I was talking about Pete Carroll not being eligible to be nominated, and the things you want to accuse Pete Carroll of cheating about, and you're actually this probably isn't going to. This argument's not going to stand much weight with you, but my argument is if Reggie Bush is getting back his Heisman, which I don't think he should, Pete Carroll cannot be, and Les Miles, for that matter, where we started this conversation, shouldn't be held accountable for the things that they did that are now legal. Everything that happened at USC would be legal today. From what I know about the allegations against Les Miles while he was at LSU that stripped him of these 37-ish wins, would be legal today. And I'm coming at this from the side of, if it's good for one, it's got to be good for another. I don't think that Reggie Bush should have gotten his Heisman back. I'd love to. I'm sure you don't either, Danny. I don't want to speak for you. But again, if I get a speeding ticket tomorrow for speeding, going 50 and a 30. And 5 years from now or 10 years from now, they raise the speed limit to 55 or 50 there. I can't go get my money back. I don't get it, man. Yeah, again, it was proven. I get it. I just don't understand it. But again, if I'm going to make exceptions for somebody, then I've got to make exceptions for everybody. And again, I only brought Pete Carroll up as one example of guys that, again, here's the point. You can think he doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame because of the allegations. I'm sorry, there aren't allegations. It was proven what he did. He got out ahead of the posse. But, the voters should have a chance to have their say and vote him in or vote him out. They have some very arbitrary requirements for getting nominated to the College Football Hall of Fame as a coach. Again, active coaches become eligible at 75 years of age. He must have been a head coach a minimum of 10 years, coached 100 games with a 600 winning percentage. That eliminates a lot of really good coaches. Forget about Pete Carroll. Howard Schnellenberger belongs in the Hall of Fame if Larry Coker does. Les Miles should be able to have his name put into nomination. Whether you think he belongs or doesn't is a different question if Larry Coker can belong in there. And again, I know I'm picking on Larry Coker a lot here. But again, Tommy Tuberville is up for nomination this year. I'm trying to think of some of the other guys, and I guess I could find it here in a second. Let's see if I can. That's 2023. Mike Leach is another example. Mike Leach, no national champions. I get it. But Mike Leach revolutionized the way college football is played. He turned football around at 3 different schools with different levels of success. Came damn close to playing for a national championship at Texas Tech and Washington State, for that matter. I mean, you cannot deny Mike Leach is a great coach. Whatever you think of him, whatever you think of schools he coached at, doesn't matter. Great football coach. He says deserving is Tommy Tuberville. Now, he's probably not getting elected, I would think. I don't know. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's just me. Speaking of USC, some other news that came down here today is there was a where is that? Of course, now I can't find it. Ole Miss, there it is. Ole Miss, USC Ole Miss had a home and home scheduled. Interesting. I'm sure another coach that you absolutely love, Danny Fuller. Lane Kiffin had scheduled home and home series with USC, his former school. And it's no more. The home and home series featured in 2 schools was scheduled for 25 and 26, was canceled according to Lane Kiffin. The series was announced in 2020. Interesting. A few months before Coach Kiffin was hired. Kiffin said the cancellation happened a while ago with USC's move to the Big Ten and uncertainty around the SEC schedule contributing to the decision to cancel the series. So I find this interesting. Again, as I said, with these bigger conferences like the Big Ten and the SEC, scheduling out of conference home and home series are going to be very difficult. Especially if you want to schedule cupcakes like the SEC is wont to do a lot of times during these and that's unfair. I mean, usually Alabama would schedule, like Alabama played Texas last year, so I'm being unfair. And everybody plays cupcakes, but it's going to get harder for the cupcakes to get a payday with these big schools and the schedules they're in turn going to have to play. Pat McAfee, not sure how you guys feel about Pat McAfee. I'm here or there. There's days, and I'm a big ESPN game day fan. I'm okay with Coach Saban joining the panel. It's getting kind of busy on that panel with Desmond Howard, with Reese Davis, the host, and Pat McAfee potentially, and Coach Saban, Coach Corso, and Kirk Herbstreit. It's getting kind of crowded in that dais, and Pat McAfee wasn't happy last year when 50% of the people that were polled said they didn't like him. There's times I like him. There's times I don't. There's times he's way over the top. Do I think it's going to kill this show if he doesn't come back? No. I like the show. I like Kirk on the show. I like his interaction with Coach Corso, and I hope Coach Corso can stay and be part of the show for as long as he wants and is able to, because their interaction is really, to me, it's precious to use a weird word to use, but talk about college sports, I guess, or sports in general. But I love the interaction between them. But McAfee has said there's been no decision about him coming back. He has no contract. They're planning on him coming back, I believe, but he has said in the past he did not want to come back. So Danny's talking about John Calipari's one of the best, gets into the College Basketball Hall of Fame. I'm just not good with rewarding cheaters, especially when it's proven, not allegations, but actually proven. Well, I get some of that too. The problem I have with anybody, the problem I have with like the NCAA, in the NFL and wherever else you want to look, right? And I've said this many times on the show, and I know people agree and then they don't agree with me, and that's fine because everybody's entitled to their opinion, including me. Everybody's doing the same stuff. Whatever Pete Carroll is doing, everybody else is doing the same thing, just didn't get caught, or they didn't want to catch them. I personally think when the NCAA puts you in their sights, as they probably did with Pete Carroll, as they did with Jim Harbaugh last year, they will find you something on you and they will punish you and your school. While other schools that are doing the same thing are left alone for whatever reason. At some point, they'll come into focus for the NCAA. So again, to me, there's selective enforcement of the rules, and that's one of the reasons I have a hard time. Had a hard time getting all worked up about the allegations about Harbaugh. I mean, the stuff that he supposedly did during COVID was just nonsense. And the stealing of signs, everybody does it. Everybody does it. Sports Illustrated, and I had this long argument with John DeLong about this. I mean, the other schools in the Big Ten admitted that they were giving signs to other schools. Ohio State and Sports Illustrated reported that Ohio State and I want to say Rutgers, it might have been Rutgers, or even Penn State maybe, were helping Purdue with the signals that Michigan used during the Big Ten championship game a few years ago. But that's not a story, right? That's not enough for the Big Ten to say, oh, we need to punish these people as well, or the NCAA, I should say, or both. So I don't know. I'm guessing that's stars or Keith Stanky, just because. Thank you, Danny. Stars are always welcome, and you are more than generous, my friend. Yankees playing tonight. Not NCAA related, but Garrett Cole is getting his first start tonight. So let's just check out the score real quick since 1-1. And let's hope, let me look at the box score. I want to make sure that Cole didn't get hurt. He's pitched 2 innings, gave up a run. We'll get into that. I will say this, and not NCAA related, but Willie Mays passed away yesterday. Willie Mays might be one of the greatest. We talk a lot, the greatest college players. And as far as athletes go, Willie Mays may be the greatest athlete I ever saw play sports. He was certainly the best all-around baseball player I ever saw. We'll talk more about Willie on the MLB update Friday, but I want to send my condolences out to Willie's family and friends, and a fairly classy individual. And I know, again, an arch rival of Danny Fuller, but I think Danny would join me in recognizing what a great player Willie was. And I broke my own rule about staying on college sports. So I don't have a way to tie this one to college. So we'll talk more about that on the MLB update. In fact, we'll talk a lot about Willie probably Friday on the MLB update. That's okay. Again, if you're giving stars and talk about the Yankees, we can digress a little bit. Chris just not filling you in, I guess. I aged out. Listen, I age out all the time, man. I just went to check the Yankee box score. I broke my own rule. That's okay. That's okay. We're here to have fun. Let me go through this. I want to go through this. I found these. Here's this team. And I just found this interesting. So ESPN's got a series of teams that left their mark. So the 30 stacking college football's 30 influential teams, from the Four Horsemen to Wishbone, Texas, Warship, Alabama. We're going to look at some of these, okay? Here's number 30. We're not even going to know some of these. Chris might remember, because Chris is really good at finding me really innocuous stuff. Sewanee, Sewanee, Sewanee. Didn't even know it. The head coach is Billy Suter, 12-0 record. He can't tell you this. He says he can't even tell you what kind of tactical brilliance Billy Suter unfurled, and I can't tell you what made captain and future college Hall of Famer Diddy Siebel so special. But I and a million of other college football fans can tell you this: over the course of 6 days and 2,500 miles of train rides in November, Suter's Iron Men played Texas A&M, Tulane, LSU, Ole Miss. They won all of those games by a combined 91-0. A few days later, after returning home, they crushed Cumberland 71-0. So I didn't even know this story. And I'm a big college football fan. Didn't even know. Interesting pick here. 2010 TCU, Gary Patterson, 13-0. He says the list is full of dynamic, innovative, and ahead of their time offenses, but TCU made this list with a dynamic defense. Gary Patterson, known for his defense, played primarily a 4-2-5 defense, and they went a combined 23-3 over 2008 and 9, and finished with back-to-back top 10 finishes. Interesting. I remember that team because I believe that was 2010. We still had the BCS. And I think TCU, I don't think we didn't have a 14 playoff yet. We had the BCS, I believe, still. And TCU was in the running there and got leapfrogged, I think, the last week. 1906 Chicago, famous head coach and Amos Alonzo Stagg, record 4-1. And they were... the reason they are influential, representatives from a number of schools came together to institute, because the game was becoming so violent, instituting vital rules changes to stretch the game out a bit and create fewer 22 body pileups. So they put in the first downs required 10 yards instead of 5, and the neutral zone was created. The flying wedge was banned. And I do believe the first face guards were used. 1998 Tulane, Tommy Bowden, who later coached Clemson. In 93, they named a young Rich Rodriguez, Glenville State. Behind a young head coach. Why are we talking about Glenville State here? And a funky nightmares offense. The Pioneers operated with extreme tempo because Rodriguez, a former West Virginia defensive back, hated defending a 2-minute drill as a player, so he had his team operate in it the whole time. I'm not really sure why this is pertinent to Tulane. Oh, I see. It got Rodriguez hired as Tulane's offensive coordinator, and the Green Wave surged from 2-9 to 7-4 behind a very innovative offense. Sean King, who did make it to the NFL later on, threw for 3,300 yards and 36 touchdowns. 3 years later, as I said, Bowden went to Clemson. Missouri in 1941, Don Farrow, 8-2. What are they known for? Greatest inventions are often born out of necessity. Missouri had just lost its greatest player to date, Paul Christman, later an NFL top pick and 2-time top 5 Heisman winner. And it was getting ready to take on a tougher non-conference matchups like Ohio State. They had mostly operated out of the single wing, but he decided that offensive line splits to create more gaps, widen the offensive line splits to create more gaps for a speedy but undersized roster, which was called the Split T. And former Mizzou basketball player who thrived on the fast break society, he would give his quarterback options. The coach was a former Missouri player. So the Split T was invented by this team. 1956, Oklahoma, Bud Wilkinson, 10-0. This was Oklahoma at that point was not the top tier of college football. But a few years later, this coach had brought Oklahoma to Oklahoma was a top tier team. What am I talking about? But he did take some stuff from other teams. In fact, he took the Split T that we just talked about from, what was the school? Missouri, and put it into play at Oklahoma. And we all know what they did after that. They beat in 54. They outscored their opponents by 24 points a game. They beat Missouri, Farrell's Missouri team, 34-13. They beat Kansas State 66-0, Texas 45-0, Notre Dame 40-0, Nebraska 54-6, Oklahoma State 53-0. One of the sport's most dominant teams. So there you have. Oklahoma was in the middle of a great rush there, by the way. Jack played on teams without a face mask. It's very clear that happened. And they should have started much sooner. Auburn in 2013, Gus Malzahn, 12-2. They're here for a couple of reasons. He was an early adopter of the wide open spread offense that the 2000s started. Urban Meyer also at Utah was a big influence in that. And number two, the what did we call that? The kick six. The kick six, Chris Davis's TD return to beat Alabama, lead Auburn over Alabama in the Iron Bowl. Another interesting team on here, the 1980 Portland State team coached by Mouse Davis. If you guys don't know who Mouse Davis was, he was one of the great offensive coordinators in the USFL, the original USFL, coached the Houston Gamblers and Jim Kelly in the run and shoot offense. And Mouse Davis was the offensive coordinator at Portland State under Tiger Ellison and became the head coach there later, Coach Neil Lomax there, and instituted this. That's where he started to put in all the principles for the run and shoot. And again, had a great influence on some guys like Hal Mummy, who went in. Again, a lot of these guys coached on together on some great teams. I want to say at Texas. Where did he coach? At Hal Mummy and Sonny Dykes. We just talked about Mike Leach, all coached on the same staff. I want to say at SMU, and I could be wrong, but again, some very influential guys. June Jones was one of the quarterbacks at Portland State, and he also went on to coach at Hawaii, SMU, coached in the NFL, played in the NFL, not very well, but he played and coached this run and shoot offense as well. Boise State, Chris Peterson, 2006. Boise State kind of put I think the group of five on the map in 2006. They'd been winning for a couple of years before that, but they'd gone 36-3 from 2002 to 2004 under Dan Hawkins. And when he left, Chris Peterson took over, and they didn't miss a beat. In fact, if you remember, they beat a great Oklahoma team in the Fiesta Bowl, I believe, with the Statue of Liberty play. LSU in 1958, Paul Dietzel, 11-0. What are they known for? In 1964, with its limited substitutions that required players you had to play one platoon offense up until 1964. You could make limited substitutions, but guys had to play both ways. Rick, you know about that. But that was because of a small high school. This was until 1964, college schools had a one platoon rule. And in 1964, that was abolished. Without the platoons, I mean, depth only mattered so much. He figured out a way to dominate with depth in a platoon era using 3 full teams of 11. He had his starters, which is a white team, a go team, primarily offensive specialists, and a set of young, fast, ruthless defenders. He would sub in either the go team or the defenders or both late in a given quarter, depending on the state of the game. So he mastered the art of substitution as LSU won 20 of 22 games from 57 to 59. Actually, I guess what we're saying here is he did this during the era of limited substitutions. 1999, Frank Beamer and Virginia Tech, 11-1. Virginia Tech reached a national championship game. Frank Beamer raised the profile of Virginia Tech tremendously. And it hit its pinnacle with Michael Vick. And think what you want of Michael Vick. Michael Vick was a great college quarterback. Don't believe he was on that list of great college quarterbacks I saw, probably because of his reputation afterwards. But this is he was a great college quarterback, and he led them to their 2 best finishes. One of them ended up in a BCS championship. When they reached the BCS championship, they lost that game. I want to say they lost to Florida. No, I don't think they did. I think they lost to Florida State, actually. BYU, Lavelle Edwards, 13-0 in 1984. Robbie Bosco, if you remember that name. BYU is very definition of an odd duck, a Mormon school in the Utah desert with a team populated by ultra clean 24-year-old athletes who had done 2-year mission trips abroad. They were coached by a man seemingly just as sight of crazy named Lavelle Edwards. Very underrated college football coach, Lavelle Edwards. And he was throw the ball a lot more than any other team in football at that time. And they won a very controversial national championship in 1984. They went to the Holiday Bowl to win that national championship game, and be a middling Michigan team, while some other teams, maybe better but not undefeated, fell by the wayside. The last time that I can remember a non-power conference team winning a national championship, 1973 Tennessee State, John Merritt, 10-0. Ed Too Tall Jones was selected first in the NFL draft. Wayman Bryant went fourth. John Holland, a wide receiver. Greg Kindle, defensive back. Carl Wafer, all went in a second. Tennessee State was an historically black college, and this was unthinkable at that time that this many players from a historical black college would be drafted. What do we got here? 6 or 7 guys in the first 2 rounds, and including 2 in the top 10. So very, very influential. And then there was many that came after that, obviously. Alabama, Bear Bryant, 1971. 5 picks after Tennessee State's Wayman Bryant went. Alabama running back Wilbur Jackson was selected in the first round. He'd started for 5 years with the 49ers in the NFL. But his legacy was already set. He was the first black athlete to accept the college scholarship from Bear Bryant in Alabama in 1971. He first saw the field. So he didn't play a lot. And one of the reasons this happened in 1970, USC went to, USC went to Legion Field. Not Legion Field. The hell's the name of the field? I can't remember now. Anyway, they went to Alabama and just walloped them like 42-20 or something like that. Sam Cunningham was one of the big stories in that game. And USC and John McKay had integrated that team long before, and Bear Bryant knew it was time that he had to get with the program and start segregating his team, Wilbur Jackson being the first one. Number 16, Stanford. Clark Shaughnessy, 10-0. What did they do? Stanford did. He put in. He crafted his own version of the tee back, the split tee, with motion and eye candy and deception. Pop Warner himself said Shaughnessy's plan he said, if Stanford wins a single game with that crazy formation, you can throw all the football I ever knew into the Pacific Ocean. Stanford didn't only just win a single game, they won all their games. Shaughnessy paused to help an old friend. And before the teams went to play in Pasadena, in Nebraska, in the Rose Bowl, Shaughnessy paused to help an old friend, George Halas, tweak his NFL championship game plan to include a few extra wrinkles. Stanford beat Nebraska in the Rose Bowl, and Chicago utterly humiliated Washington 73-0 in the NFL championship game. That'll cause a ripple in a hurry is the statement here. Very well put. 15, Oregon, 2007. Mike Bellotti, 9-4. So after going 21-3 and from 2000 to 2001, Bellotti's Ducks averaged just 7 wins per season over 5 years that followed. They need a jolt of energy. That jolt was offensive coordinator Chip Kelly. And we know what he brought, the spread offense and revolutionary way. He, again, another guy who had a great effect on college football, both as a offensive coordinator. He came from New Hampshire, by the way. And later he was the head coach of the Ducks for a couple of years, and we parlayed that into a couple of NFL jobs. And now he is the offensive coordinator of USC. 1935 TCU. I got to make some changes. Sorry, I had an important text from Mac at National Streaming Sports. We'll talk about some of those changes to some scheduling I might have talked about before. TCU, Dutch Meyer, 12-1 they were. The secret to success for both quarterback greats, Dutch Meyer in a spread offense. Don't know why. Spread formation. You can get a nice used copy for the. This is his book. He wrote a book called. The Spread Formation Football. You probably get you can get a copy on Amazon for a mere $1,200. So when we talk about the spread offense and Chip Kelly and Urban Meyer and some of the other guys, this guy was running it in 1934 at TCU. Everything old is new again. There's no new inventions, right? These things have all been around. Oklahoma, Barry Switzer, 11-0 in 1974. A few years before, Oklahoma, having just won 20 games in 3 seasons, and battled head coach Chuck Fairbanks, reviled in Foxborough to this day, by the way, sent his bright young offensive coordinator Barry Switzer to Austin to learn the wishbone from its inventor, Texas coordinator Emory Bellard. That Texas head coach, Darrell Royal, allowed this, speaks to an almost foolish level of generosity on his part, because Oklahoma perfected the wishbone that Texas had pretty much developed. And from 71 to 75, with Fairbanks passing the baton to Switzer, the Sooners went a combined 54-3-1, and 5-0 against the Longhorns. So probably a good idea not to give your ultimate rival the keys to the Jerry Taggy against Jack Childress. John Gonzalez from Sports Authority comes up with the 2 quarterbacks, and I believe we're talking about that Nebraska. Are we talking about the Nebraska? Where were we when we were talking about that, John? Oh, gosh, I don't remember. Help me out, John. I think that was it wasn't Oregon. It wasn't TCU. It wasn't Oklahoma. I lost track of who that was now. It had to be the Nebraska, and there it is. No, that can't be Clark Shaughnessy. There's no way Jerry Taggy played for the Cornhuskers for sure. I know that, but I'm trying to think about. Oh, we're talking about. I'm not sure where the Jack Childress and what do you call it reference comes in, John. But welcome tonight. Right now, we're running down some weird ESPN list has for the 30 most influential teams in college football history and why they were influential. And we were talking about Nebraska in a 1935 Rose Bowl. I know Jerry Taggy didn't play then. And you're right. Coach Devaney, Bill Devaney was one of the greatest coaches in college football history at Nebraska for sure. Speaking of that Oklahoma team, that's probably why you came up with the reference. We were talking about those great Oklahoma teams under Fairbanks and Switzer. And Jerry Taggy was one of those quarterbacks that played against Jack Childress. I believe Jack Childress was an Oklahoma quarterback at one point. We did this 2011 Alabama. Nick Saban, 12-1. The spread offense revolution was already unfolding. Saban was proving its limits. The other teams could have fun with tempo and sparkle and whatnot. He was going to vacuum up a record number of national titles by simply recruiting better than anybody on the planet. He built a warship model that has basically won 8 of the past 14 national championships, 6 for Bama, 2 for Kirby Smart at Georgia, which is being a bit generous to Coach Saban. But, Kirby did cut his teeth with Alabama and Coach Saban, who's only the greatest college football coach of all time. I will never stop saying that. Coach Devaney, great coach. Coach Switzer, great coach. Coach Bear Bryant, Coach McKay, all great coaches. Woody Hayes, great coach. None are better than Nick Saban. Notre Dame, 1947, Frank Leahy. Leahy had his own warship model. It's a 47 Fighting Irish roster, overflowing with future pro talent. At a level that would make Nick Saban jealous, it says here. They featured 43 players in 1947 that would go on to play professional football. That's a lot, right? He took advantage of wartime transfer and eligibility rules, which is to say he had a lot of men who were more experienced than a typical college football player at the time. 1912 Carlisle. Head coach, Pop Warner himself. speaking of great coaches, Pop Warner we've already talked about. Alonzo Stagg we've already talked about. John brings up Devaney, Eric Parsegian, all great coaches. Daryl Royal we talked about. I mentioned Woody. I mentioned Bud Wilkinson we talked about a little while ago. All great coaches. McKay, great coach. Bear Bryant, great coach. Nick Saban, greatest football coach of all time. Notre Dame might have the most great head coaches of all time for sure. And Eric Parsegian was a great coach. And Eric Parsegian left behind a team that won a national championship for Dan Devine, who, is not known as, one of the greatest coaches of all time, had coached some really good Missouri teams. Went to Green Bay, coached there for a bit. But he took over for Coach Parsegian and actually won a national championship with his players. So Schembechler doesn't have the national titles, though, that a lot of these other guys, not even Woody Hayes has. But the 10-year war, and by the way, I seem to always promote a 30 for 30 on this show. Watch, I think it's a 30 for 30. It might be on HBO. And you can get it. If you have HBO or HBO Max, you can watch this documentary on the 10-year war, Washington State and Iowa. Jesus Christ. Ooh, wake up, Keith. Ohio State, Keith. Ohio State and Michigan. The 10-year war. It's a great, great documentary. One year during that 10-year war, Michigan was getting hammered by Ohio State like 50-0. It was 48-0, maybe, whatever. They scored a late touchdown to make it 53 or 54-0. And Woody went for 2, like hardly any time on the clock. And they asked him after the game why he went for 2, and he said because it wouldn't let me go for 3. That tells you what that was like. Great point here. Wilkinson Sooners 47 straight wins will never be eclipsed. Not in today's day and age for sure, Danny. I agree 100%. The man you hate, I wonder if he has a second. Pete Carroll's USC teams are very close. I got to get through the rest of this list. I don't want to get into the top 10 and not finish it. College football longest winning streaks. Seventh longest. All right, here we go. We get 7 longest. We know who's on top. Number 6 is Penn, 34. Tied for 6 is Miami from 2000 to 2002, again 34. Toledo 69 to 71, 35. Interesting. Yale 87, 89. And then again, they did it twice from 90 to 93 as well, 37 in a row. Yale did it twice, 37 in a row. Washington is number 2 from 08 to 14, 40 in a row. And, of course, as Danny says, Bud Wilkinson's Oklahoma team from 53 to 57, 47 in a row, most likely unbeatable. As is UCLA's 88 straight. I would agree with that 100% too. Just watch that game on YouTube the other night, Danny's. The one that they lost to end that streak. They had a pretty sizable lead late in that game, and they ended up losing to Notre Dame, who made a great run under a very young Digger Phelps. Yeah, I remember watching that Gator Bowl. I was 18 years old. I hadn't even turned. Yeah, I turned 18. Yeah, I was 18 years old. No, I was 17 years old. My birthday was in August. Watching that game on TV and not even believing what I just watched when Woody hit. I want to say he was a linebacker named. We had this discussion, I think, on a Sunday, didn't we, John? I thought his name was Charlie Bauman. I could be wrong. But let me get back to my list here real quick and finish this up. Carlisle, 93, Florida. Steve Spurrier, 11-2. Alabama had ruled the SEC for most of the 70s with otherworldly defense and a dynamic run game. Georgia ruled it from 80 to 82 with defense and Herschel Walker. Auburn won 4-7 conference titles from 83 to 89 with defense and running backs like Bo Jackson and a plethora of other guys. Johnny Majors won it 1 year with a 1,200-yard rusher and a top 15 defense. So the SEC was playing a certain type of game, but Florida and Steve Spurrier, the old bowl coach, decided to turn tables here and start throwing the football. Shane Matthews, who I had on 101 with Keith Engle a few years ago, threw for 3,100 yards, and the Gators won the SEC. They won again in 93 with Daniel Werfel and Terry Dean combining for 3,800. So Steve Spurrier and that team changed the way the game was played in the SEC. Charlie Baumett is correct. Check that memory out, man. I got so much information in here. You know what the hard part is? To get it to come out here. It's just amazing. Number 8, 1967 Grambling. Eddie Robinson, 9-1. Robinson didn't really do sass. He built his program, his Grambling winning machine around toughness, discipline, and a playbook that featured only the most tried and true methods for asserting toughness and discipline. It worked to the tune of 408 career wins, 9 black college national championships, and 17 SWAC titles. He was Coach of the Year. He has Coach of the Year awards named after him in both FBS and FCS. His 67 Tigers might have been his best and most important team. And the reason for that is, I don't even need to look at the story for this because I was reading about it recently in a book I was reading. Eddie Robinson's big goal was to get a quarterback to the NFL. And the quarterback that came through that system that finally broke through was James Harris, who was drafted, I believe, by the Bills, who let him play quarterback a little bit. Then he got traded to the Rams and actually took the Rams to an NFC championship game. 2019, this is number 7, 2019 LSU, Ed Orgeron, 15-0. There was actually innovation. There was actually the innovation factor with a wide variety of RPO and pass concepts derived from both passing game coordinator Joe Brady's brain and an absurd array of receiving options available. You aren't going to get many better teams with these types of options, by the way. Jamar Chase on the same team. And throw the ball to him the same, any play. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Terrace Marshall Jr., Thaddeus Moss, running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of the backfield. They were able to both create and exploit matchups and advantage instantly, while RPOs are designed mostly to exploit zone defenses. LSU could beat man-to-man and zone equally well. 1991 Iowa Wesleyan. We've talked about Hal Mumme a couple of times. After a couple of years of slowly integrating his wild pass-heavy vision of the air raid offense at Iowa Wesleyan with solid success, it was time for Hal Mumme to unfurl the entire thing in 1991. Full-time shotgun formations, enormous line splits that had never been seen outside of trick plays. A mock speed, 2-minute drill all the time, up-tempo offense that produced more than 80 plays per game. No playbook. Quarterback often calling his own plays at the line. Something unheard of in college football at that time. Dustin DeWald produced numbers, outstanding numbers for that time. 400 completions, 4,100 yards, 45 touchdowns that even put Ty Detmer at BYU and David Klingler at Houston to shame. They went 10-1 during that season. Texas Tech in 2008, Mike Leach, another air raid visionary. Mumme indeed carried that vision from Texas high school ranks to Iowa Wesleyan, as we just talked about. His right-hand man for a lot of that journey was Mike Leach. Leach arrived in Lubbock in 2000. Texas Tech was in a rut. They'd won between 5 and 7 games in 8 of the 9 previous seasons. His gunslinging offense fit West Texas like a glove. After a pair of seven-win seasons, he would win at least 8 in each of his final 8 years on the job. Tech has won only 8 games, only 4 times. They've won 8 games only 4 times since he left. He had a 4-star quarterback in Graham Harrell, throwing to the best receiver, Michael Crabtree, in 2008. Tech began the season 10-0. And as I said, they got to number 2. They were in position to potentially play for a national championship that year, but they lost 2 of their last 3 games. 86, Miami, Jimmy Johnson, 11-1. Few teams get the schematic and cultural influences, get to be schematic and cultural influences. But more than any single coach, Jimmy Johnson, who happened to be the defensive line coach when Switzer was installed at Oklahoma State, when Switzer was installing the wishbone offense in Norman, he seemed responsible for the demise of the Sooners' relationship with the wishbone. Oklahoma went 33-3 from 85 to 87, beating everyone not named Miami, but losing to the Hurricanes 3 times. So all times, they beat everybody they played except Miami during those times, scoring just 14, 16, and 14 points in the process. So Miami and Jimmy Johnson found a way to stop that wishbone offense, and Jimmy Johnson had that born when he was at Oklahoma State. Interesting stuff. Bear Bryant was definitely mentioned. I definitely mentioned Bear Bryant in the greatest coaches of all time, for sure. And he was mentioned on this list earlier for integrating finally in 1971. The 71 Alabama team is mentioned here, and Bear Bryant for finally integrating after getting killed by USC the year before with a heavily integrated team that John McKay brought to Alabama and beat the Crimson Tide. But as I said before, Bear Bryant, to me, as far as great coaches and the best coaches of all time, John, it's Saban and Bear Bryant and everybody else. That's just me. And I'm putting John McKay third, by the way. And I know Danny Fuller is going to hate me for that. Then Wilkinson. Then Woody Hayes, maybe. I can do that. Maybe next week we dive into this topic a little bit more. Number 3, Alabama, Wallace Wade, 1925 Alabama. Witness huge result, huge game, immediately think everything changes. Alabama's 1925 football team, they changed everything, led by a number of future college Hall of Famers, from head coach Wallace Wade to players like Johnny Mack Brown, Pooley Holbert. Crimson Tide rolled to an unbeaten record, walloping 9 regular season opponents by a combined 277-7. They gave up 7 points all year. For any number of reasons, both cultural and football related, the Rose Bowl usually looked past Southern schools when inviting a team to play against the West best, but there was no obvious or Northeastern or Midwestern. By the way, they would bring teams like Wisconsin. They didn't have the ties that they had for decades to the Pac-8 and then the Big Ten, but they were still bringing in the Wisconsins to play the West Coast teams and teams like that, or East Coast teams for that matter. I believe Army and had played in the Rose Bowl, but they weren't picking these Southern teams. But Alabama forced their hand here, and they went there and they won that Rose Bowl. 1924, Notre Dame is number 2 on this list with Nuke Rockne, his son mentioned previously in the show by Chris F. Grave. The year before Alabama's breakthrough, a team from a Catholic school in northern Indiana enjoyed something similar. Admittedly, against weak schedules, Notre Dame had gone a combined 45-3-1 from 1919 to 23, but Rockne's promotional abilities combined with Grantland Rice's typewriter made everything take off in 1924. And they topped it off with a 13-7 win in the Rose Bowl, I believe, against Rice. I think it was a Rose Bowl. I'm sorry, they beat Stanford in the Rose Bowl. Pop Warner Stanford team. Fighting Irish wouldn't accept another bowl invitation for 45 years. But they didn't have to. They were Notre Dame. Texas, 1968, Darrell Royal. 9-1-1. So many college football innovations have started far outside of the mainstream. Places like Carlisle, we mentioned, Mount Pleasant, Iowa. But one of the single most influential innovations of all time took place at one of college football's power schools. and that is again, we talked about already, the wishbone offense, which Emery Bellard, who was Darrell Royals' offensive coordinator, just made a devastating offense, and they went on to a great run through the 60s into the early 70s. I think they began in 1968 with a tie against Houston, and a loss to Texas Tech, but they won their next game and didn't lose again until 1971, and had some great games. Several games of the century included. Well, Nebraska and Oklahoma played in one, Texas and Arkansas played in another, and I believe Texas might have played Oklahoma in another game of the century. So I thought that list was kind of fun to talk about here in a off-season Wednesday night. We're going to wrap it up here in just a minute, guys, as I got to jump on with Robert Butler on Sports Scopes. Check that out. I'll try to share it. I'll probably share it to my stream once I get over there, so you can stay here and stay on the Facebook page if you want to check that out. Our guest again Friday will be Jim Sundberg, former catcher with the Texas Rangers, Brewers, Royals, one of the 85 World Series champion Kansas City Royals. He'll be my guest at 9 o'clock in the a.m. Friday morning. And then next week we will have Dennis Rasmussen, former Yankee and Red, among others, will be our guest. So I appreciate all you guys coming in tonight. Appreciate you dealing with me going through this list. Hope you guys have a great Wednesday night. And we'll see you Friday morning with Jim Sundberg. And Friday afternoon on the MLB update, lots of Willie Mays. Let's tell some stories. Let's have some fun and celebrate the great life of Willie Mays. Guys, have a great Wednesday night. See you later. Keith Engle for TGI Sports Talks, College Football Huddle. Bye-bye.